Hello and welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. We've got a bang-up show for you today. We're going to be joined by America's leading criminologist, if I can get the word out, Dr. Currie Myers. We've got a lot that we're going to discuss, including his new book, The Advent of Feral Men, which I think is a very, very interesting topic. You're going to be interested to know about his background as the former sheriff of, was it Kansas City, I believe it was, Doctor?
Johnson County, Kansas, which is in the Kansas City metro area.
Okay. All right. So you'll be fascinated to learn about his background. I remember talking to him about the Idaho killer before the Idaho killer was caught, or the alleged killer was caught. And it was just fascinating because he was like, more than likely, you're going to have this, this, and this. And then when they arrested the guy, it was like, that, and that. And I was like, okay, this guy is pretty freaky. Which means he's really good at what he does. So that's why he's America's leading criminologist. So anyway, Dr. Currie Myers, without any further ado, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you so much, Carl. I think so much of you, and I appreciate being on your show very much.
Okay, absolutely, and I appreciate that. Let's get in right. The title of your book right away. I was like, The Advent of Feral Men. Feral, I'm thinking, stray cat, wild animal, something like that. Why did you decide to title your book The Advent of Feral Men?
Well, when we think about feral, we think about feral hogs, feral cats, feral dogs, and the genesis behind the book is I was concerned with the wilding of humans that seemed to be occurring, in my opinion.
Wow.
And it fit, I think, they're actually acting feral. And I said, the feral man. And I put Advent because it was, I wrote the book first. And when I write I haven't written that many books, but I believe in themes. So I wrote quite a bit of the book before having a title yet, and then looked back at the book and said, here's the themes. Now I need to come up with a title. And we were right in the middle of right after Thanksgiving, and we were in the middle of Advent season, which means the coming. So The Advent of Feral Man seemed like a perfect title and to capture what the heck is going on in crime and criminal justice issues, and quite frankly, criminal justice public policy. So I thought it fit well, and I've had many people comment that it was a pretty interesting title and one that draws attention to the problem pretty quickly.
I think absolutely it does. I mean, it did so for me. I want you, if you would, before we get started I'm going to have more questions lined up about your book here. But before we get started, you have an extensive history, obviously with crime, but also with homicides. Can you tell the audience about that?
Well, I started out my career, I was a Kansas state trooper and involved in that work for the beginning of my career. And it was an excellent job. It was a very professional. As you can imagine, state troopers are often viewed as kind of a cut above the way they act, the way they look, the way they behave. I rode around with a state trooper my junior year in college, and I said, that's what I want to do. and
Wow.
And I ended up becoming one, and I was honored to be one of the few that calls themselves a state trooper. But it set a great mindset for me because as a state trooper, as you can imagine, you're by yourself a lot. So you have to be self-initiative. You have to have a lot of self-initiative and drive, and you don't have a lot of backup. So you have to act for yourself. You have to be careful. You have to have a level of BS, quite frankly, sometimes to get out of jams. And you don't always rely on physical force. You rely on the human side of speaking with people and relating to people. And if things get nasty, you have to go to that. But you have to rely often about verbal and nonverbal skills. And I began to be pretty good at that level of work. And I decided that the best place for me was to be as an investigator. And so I became a special agent with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Started out in our special operations unit. So I did deep undercover work on large purchases I was detailed to DEA for 5 years. So as a task force federal agent, during that time period, I was in the 1993 federal building shootout and bombing incident on a
What?
case that I was involved in
Wow.
in
Okay. I did
Topeka,
not know that.
Kansas. Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
a survivor of an active shooter incident. But the interesting part, it wasn't just shooter; it was bombs. He had been. We had argued. When I say we, the U.S. attorney and I was one of the case agents in the case. We had made the argument that he shouldn't be left out on bond, and he was. And while he was out on bond, he made probably 25 to 30 different types of bombs, time delay bombs. Um, uh, and other types of accelerants to use. And he ended up storming the federal courthouse in Topeka in October of 1993. And I happened to be there for court at the time. So it was a day I'll never forget. It was a day that you pray and ask God to look over you and that you can see your family and children again. But it also, I learned a lot on life and what's important in life. After that, I decided not to be involved on the drug side of investigations. I also did uh, basically hired hits. I was someone who worked undercover and would act as a hitman for people. So you have to understand, I had
Unbelievable.
longer hair then, and a long goatee, and rode a Harley, and so I was somebody that you could set
I
up where I would
okay. I gotta ask you there, Doc. Again, I'm speaking to Dr. Currie Myers. He is the author of The Advent of Feral Men. Also, you can check out his podcast, Dr. Currie Myers, America's Criminologist. Okay, so that's astonishing to me. You went undercover. You were a hired hitman. That's insane to me. Let me ask you this: who was doing the most hiring, men or women? I'm curious.
It's actually it's both. I had a number of women, usually wives, that would
Wow.
want to do a hit on their husband. And of course, I would meet with them. We would agree to a price. We would meet to exchange the cash. And of course, I didn't do the hit. Yeah, that would be illegal.
Sure. Sure.
We would then take down the person. But we did business people. We had lawyers wanted to get rid of partners. The businesses wanted to
Really?
get rid of business partners. I would say the vast majority were they were doing something illicit to begin with and wanted to off their competition. So a lot of drug dealers will want to off their competition. So they might try to retain somebody. And all this would come as the use of informants and cooperating individuals, which play an extremely important role in law enforcement. If it wasn't for cooperating individuals, we wouldn't be successful in law enforcement. So it's the ability to use cooperating individuals, assess that information, find out if it's reliable, and then take those steps necessary to either work on a major drug transaction or potentially do a murder for hire. It's kind of in the same genre. So, there were times you get hit up to do those things. But after the 1993 shooting, I felt like that I was starting to wear on me a little bit doing that undercover work. My wife married me as a state trooper. So as you can imagine, I was very clean and very, short hair and very professional looking. And then, after about a year working undercover, I look like somebody totally different, and spending 5 years doing that, I look like somebody different. So it was time to come home and do something else. So that's when I transferred to our field division, which does homicides, public corruption, police corruption. And that's where I did the lion's share of the homicides, either assisting on homicides, being a case agent on homicides, or helping to supervise agents in the field as they worked homicide. So That gave us some great diversity of experience. And then when I became sheriff of one of the largest sheriff's offices in the Midwest. Johnson County, Kansas is about 650,000 population. It's the largest populated county in Kansas, and had a department around 750 sworn. So that's not big for big urban centers, but it's big for the Midwest. And so we were actually one of the larger sheriff's offices in the Midwest. And I had an average daily jail population of probably close to 900 inmates or detainees a day. So I learned a lot about corrections and learned a lot about the importance of having a good constitutional sheriff that's not just running a department, but a good sheriff is going to be the person that represents the citizens.
Doc, let's leave it there. We have to take a hard break, but we'll be right back. Dr. Currie Myers, America's Criminologist. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. And again, I'm joined by my guest, Dr. Currie Myers. Guys, before we get back to the doctor, America's leading criminologist, I want to talk to you about wealth protection research. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we all hold sacred, and that is free speech. It is the cornerstone that supports every freedom that we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. That's where wealth protection research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth protection research is not a financial advisory firm. They are defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silence. Wealth protection research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the free best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election cycle. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free. All you have to do is text the word ideas to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Again, text the word ideas, IDEAS, to 76626. Claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment does not think you can handle, and to take control of your financial destinies. Again, text the word ideas to 76626. And if you text the word ideas today, you'll also get a free gold investment kit from Wealth Protection Research that is sponsored by Augusta Precious Metals. Wealth Protection Research. All right, guys, let's get back to our guest, Dr. Currie Myers. All right, Doc, you got me really curious before we went to the break. You were giving your history, you were giving your experience, sharing your experience, and I thought it was very important to build the foundation for the audience before I get into these questions regarding crime, because I believe that America's crime rates are out of control. I know there are many that say, listen, we've got them under control, but maybe it's just the media. I don't believe it is. I believe crime is absolutely insane. I believe that it's kind of been unleashed. I believe the left has done a great job of demonizing the police around the country, and it's having an effect. So I want to get into that. But before we do, you mentioned that you were undercover for several years, or working as an undercover officer for several years. And I just want to know real quickly, Doc, how does that impact someone like yourself? I mean, if you're working undercover, obviously you're dealing with the worst of the worst. Even if you're a cop, you're a state trooper. Oftentimes, I know you deal with regular everyday citizens, but obviously you're going to be dealing with the worst of the worst people almost on a daily basis. And then you go undercover, you deal with people that are scheming, that are the worst of the worst. What do you do to protect yourself, to make sure you don't become one of them?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think over time it affects everybody. There's no way it couldn't. Any average person would feel affected, because you feel the underworld is different. I mean, it's a different place. It's not. I wrote in my book The Importance of Faith, Family, and Formation, and I truly believe that. Well, I was formed in a faith life. I had great family. I had a strong mother and father, a loving childhood, and I was formed correctly. They they taught me the golden rule and things that are important. So when you have that background, it's difficult to go into the underworld and exist. Now, I was blessed, I suppose is the term, but was a very good actor and I could pretend to be something different. That was something I always was pretty good at. And I was a professional singer, still am occasionally, but I do Rat Packs type stuff. But so I know about theatrics, I know how to perform. And that ended up being a benefit, I guess, to working undercover as you feel at ease and you take on a persona. But I think the biggest thing that you notice over time is that it's hard to turn off that persona just when you go home. And then, and your language changes, and it's hard to, it's hard when you go home to just, okay, I'm pulling into my white picket fence and my beautiful, wife. And now I have 5 children, and it's vastly different from what I came from, just an hour or so ago. Now I tried to never work undercover where in the city that I lived. Luckily, being with DEA and KBI, I could go work in other areas, and that's what I did to work undercover. But that also meant I was gone for long periods of time. I might be gone for a couple of weeks working a case undercover before I go back home, and then I would come back because it meets the sobriquet. You're trying to show that you're a big-time drug dealer or somebody that's nationwide. So it's not uncommon for those to be in and out or be gone for a couple of weeks and come back. And you use that to your advantage. But the KBI did a very good job controlling us. And I think that's the most important part that law enforcement agencies have to do. You have to ensure that you are also controlling your own people and saying when to stop, and be situationally aware on your own employees when you see them acting strangely or being a little bit strange. That's one. And the KB also reinforced to me that I am a special agent. I'm in charge of this case, and I determine what I do. I don't let somebody else, a bad guy, determine anything that I do. I don't let informants tell me what we're going to do. I tell them. They give me a framework for that information, but I dictate the case. I dictate when I want to do a deal. I dictate how I'm going to do it. And then you have to have surveillance and sometimes counter surveillance, because sometimes you might be dealing with somebody big that actually might be surveilling you and might pick up your team. So sometimes you have to have counter surveillance if you think you're going to have those. So Overwatch, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is extremely important. But there was a time after that 1993 incident that I basically said, I've got to move on, and I've got to now focus on something else as a law enforcement officer, because I felt like that was enough, and I needed to get back to being, a more traditional police officer. And that's when I started working homicides.
Okay. All right. So now that you guys know the background of Dr. Currie Myers, and again, an extensive background in law enforcement, let's talk about your book, The Advent of Feral Man. Again, a very, very interesting title. And I think I think you hit it right on, because I feel like we are starting to see essentially men and criminals behave like wild animals. But I also believe in large part that's because many cities are allowing them to do so. Case in point, if I recall correctly, you recently had either a podcast or a column that you had written. New York City, Mayor Eric Adams and the governor of New York are now considering, maybe it's time to demask people after so many criminals are using masks to get away with crime. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, duh, that's only been on the books for centuries. I mean, if you were going to do a train robbery in 1860, you would wear a mask, and that's the only reason why you'd wear a mask. Other than that, it'd be because the horses are kicking up dust and you're wearing a mask when you're in I live in the Midwest, we have dust storms. You might put a mask on, but other than that, you didn't wear a mask. You certainly couldn't wear a mask into a bank. You certainly couldn't wear a mask into somebody's business. They think you would be insane to do that. So now I hate to have to codify something. We live in a society of overregulation anyway, but there are plenty of laws on the books. New York has had that law on the books for over 100 years, if not longer, that you can't wear a mask unless you are deathly sick, and you can't wear it like when you're in public display in masses of people. So it makes perfect sense to me. Listen, if you're wearing a mask now, you're doing it because you want to hide your identity. That's plain and simple. And there's people that actually wanted to wear their mask when they're taking their driver's license pictures and all that kind of craziness. Listen, let's do away with all this woke crap that's going on and get back to the basics. But wearing a mask is not proper etiquette for being in the public. It's certainly if you have cancer or things like that and you want to isolate, everybody should understand that. But if you're rioting on a college campus, and don't lecture me about wearing masks and you want to do it for public health reasons, because it's a bunch of bunk.
Yeah, for sure. We only have 30 seconds left in this block here, but I got to tell you real quick, Doc, again, I'm speaking to Dr. Currie Myers. Go out and get his book, The Advent of Feral Men, and we'll be diving into that a little more deeply shortly here. But I can tell you, going to the bank during the COVID lockdowns, people would be wearing masks. I never wore a mask if there was a sign up where, it was okay to go in without a mask, I go in. If not, I wouldn't. But I remember going into banks a couple of times and I saw people going in to the banks with masks. I had never been more fearful to enter a bank because I'm like, these people are wearing masks. Are we going nuts?
Yeah,
anyway,
crazy.
Listen, all right, we'll be back more with Dr. Currie Myers. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show, and this segment is brought to you by MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell, MyPillow.com. You guys know that Mike has been basically canceled. He's been canceled from the box stores, from the shopping channels. But the good news is you haven't canceled him. Right now, MyPillow is offering a $25 extravaganza. And right now, when Mike started, you guys know that when Mike started his My Pillow company, he had one product, but now he has hundreds of products thanks to his loyal and dedicated employees. And he wants to offer all of you guys a deal. $25, the $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows are just $25. The My Pillow sandals are just $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are just $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels are just $25. And for the first time ever, the premium My Pillows with all new Giza fabric are just $25 as well. If you order over $75 or orders over $75, I should say, we'll receive free shipping as well. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use my name, Carl, C-A-R-L. I don't spell it like the communist, C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 800-858-0263, 800-858-0263. Okay, I'm speaking with my guest, Dr. Currie Myers. We've got a lot of criminal issues to get to, but we were speaking before we went to the break, talking about mask and New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the governor of New York, the nanny of New York, as I call her, Kathy Hochul, are considering, if they haven't already, they've decided to ban masks after all of the COVID lockdowns. Doc, now you said something offline that I thought was very fascinating. You talked about how masking brings out the darker side of criminals or something to that effect?
Yeah, it's the dark psychological traits, or it reinforces it, the dark psychological traits. So when you start getting into social isolation, when you start to go down, when you become lonely, and COVID was part of that, but a lot of social disintegration occurs not only during COVID, but if we don't have the right family, faith, and formation, you're going to be isolated and you're not going to be engaged because you want to be by yourself. You don't have a faith life. You don't have a family life. You're not formed correctly. You don't give discipline and structure. So it leads people to social disintegration because they become more and more socially isolated. Well, when that happens, the dark psychological traits can play a significant role in people's lives. Now, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a criminologist, but I certainly study the effects of crime and man. And in my opinion, the dark psychological traits have attributed to the advent of feral man, to that wilding of humans that goes on. And in particular, the dark tetrad. So if you look at narcissism, Machiavellianism, certain psychopathies, think of those. I think of those as like the 7 deadly sins on steroids. You know, if there's this overabundance of the 7 deadly sins. And then lastly, sadism. If you throw those 4 things together, that becomes someone who gets overwhelmed with the dark tetrads. And it's bandwagon effect and observational learning, which that's how we learn as humans. These information cascades that come from social media, where we're just constantly reinforced with negative issues, and it really evolves into groupthink, group identity, de-individuation. All those things occur, and that makes us more susceptible to mental health issues, and it makes us more susceptible to go down to the dark sides, especially if we lose our faith life. Just imagine, I believe Satan is alive and well, and
So do I.
he prowls about the earth seeking the ruin of souls. And so if we don't have a basis for that understanding, we can open ourselves up almost every day to something that could lead us down to a dark path that we might not ever be able to get out of. So when you throw all those things together, mental health with Generation Z is like nearly 2 out of 5, I think was the last study, that are suffering from significant mental health issues. 42% are on psychotropic medicine of Generation Z, Zers. So those are concerns of mine. And so wearing masks is a perfect way to continue to de-individuation of yourself. And if you're in masses like these, like we saw with riots, and you can hide, you can become anonymous, and as a result, you can foster and do things that you would have never thought of doing before. And that's the reason you don't wear masks in public like that. You never have. We've had laws on the books for hundreds of years. You can't wear a mask into a bank. You can't wear masks into most people's businesses. It's socially unacceptable to begin with, but there's a lot of government institutions, a lot of banks that you can't put those kinds of things on. So they need to be enforced. Carl, the whole problem with this is we've lacked from focused deterrence. That's the problem in America today. There's no discipline anymore. It's nihilism on steroids. Everything's okay. You're okay. I'm okay. Do what you want to do. Nothing matters because nothing else exists except me.
Well, Well, speaking to that point, we have about 5 minutes left in this block, and there's several issues that I want to get to. And there's some there's some outlines and some chapters in your book. Again, I'm speaking of Dr. Currie Myers. He is the author of the new book, The Advent of Feral Men. You can find him online or on social media at Dr. Currie Myers, Curriemyers. And one of the things you talk about is you talk about how basically we're enabling crime. We have become a society of enablers. I'll tell you real quickly, when I was sitting in for Larry Elder, his producer at the time told me that he lives in Los Angeles. He walked into a Home Depot, and I know exactly which Home Depot it was. He walks into this Home Depot. He had saved some money. He wanted to buy this tool. He would repair old bikes in his spare time. It was one of his hobbies, one of the things that he loved doing for relaxing. He bought this special tool that he wanted to add to his collection. It was right over $900 or whatever it was. And then as he was sitting there just with excitement and listen, I've got the money for this tool, he literally watched a man take the same tool and walk out of the Home Depot, where they did absolutely nothing about it. And then he sat there thinking, am I a fool or what?
Well, that's the frustration when you don't have structure and if you don't have discipline, whether it's in your family or whether it's in society, what's going to happen? Well, people are going to take advantage of that. That's human nature. And so this is part of what's called Prop 47 in California, which was the basically decriminalization of drugs and decriminalization of some crimes. And in Prop 47, you could basically steal up to $950 per incident, not per day, but per incident, with it not being a rise to the level of a misdemeanor, let alone it used to be a felony. It used to be anything over $500 was a felony. Now, then it became a misdemeanor. Now it's nothing. And what happens is if nothing gets enforced, then what are people going to do? There's no carrot and stick philosophy. There's just a carrot and people walk out. So that means you could literally steal $950 worth of stuff, come back 3 hours later and do it again and do it every day, 365 days a year, and it will never rise to the threshold of a felony. It's which insane. Is just insane. And so when you have that, and then you have, when I talk about enable and not treat, we're not treating mental health issues. We're enabling things. If we have a social contagion of transgenderism right now, there's no treatment for it. We enable people with this. We're trying to get kids. We're okay with surgery of children because we're enabling people who say, I want to be a cat. So we let people be a cat instead of treating them, treating them with respect, but also treating them and getting them help so they can get back to the way that they used to be.
You know, recently we only have a minute left in this block, so we'll have to be quick here. But you're absolutely right. I recently donated to a Dr. Ethan Heim, and he's the gentleman that's being persecuted because he was the whistleblower at this Texas hospital, basically, that was still performing these surgeries. But it's absolutely insane. This guy is being it's almost as if the Hippocratic Oath is being weaponized against him, or he's being criminalized because he believes in the Hippocratic Oath. It's the craziest thing. We are living in a crazy society. Listen, Doc, we only have 40 seconds left before the break. I'd like to bring you back because I got several more questions for you, but just real quickly here, there's been illegal immigrants that have committed some severe crimes. Laken Riley, Rachel Moren. We've had a couple of 13-year-olds, and we know the numbers are even worse, probably not being reported, that have been raped by illegal immigrants. Just real quick, 20 seconds. Give us your take before we go out to break on that, and we'll continue after the break.
Well, like our criminal justice philosophy, our immigration philosophy is a lack of focused deterrence. And when you don't have deterrence for people to get in and you don't vet them, you get what you get. So we have 10 million people, 11, 12 million people that we have no idea what their backgrounds are. And a lot of them have criminal histories.
And we're going to find out about it, unfortunately. We'll be back in a few. This is the Carl Jackson Show, speaking to Dr. Currie Myers. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Guys, I just want to let you know that today's, or this segment anyway, is brought to you by Priority Gold. Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and your 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise and global uncertainty looming, it's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. In times like this, Proverbs 21:20 reminds us to preserve what we built. Right now, that wisdom points us towards gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, well, it's time to make it a priority. My name is Carl Jackson, and I urge you to call my friends at Priority Gold to find out how they can help you diversify your savings and physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit prioritygold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD. All right, now back to my guest. Again, we're speaking to Dr. Currie Myers. He has written the book, or he's the author of a new book, The Advent of Feral Men, and basically, listen, guys, men are going to become wild. We're seeing this. It's almost, Doc, looking at a lot of these cities and these mayors and even governors, oftentimes, that have demonized law enforcement, that have participated or encouraged this defund the police movement. We're seeing a rash of crime seemingly in these particular cities, counties, states, so on, etc. It's absolutely insane. Do you expect that crime will get? What do you expect we're going to see? Do you think crime is going to get? We're going to see less crime, more crime. What do you see?
Well, we're going to continue to see an increase in crime, and we have not. So the president at the State of the Union address said that crime has been reduced 50%. It hasn't been lower since the 1970s. I wrote a Substack immediately after that to discount that. Number one, the FBI statistics are spurious. They're not correct. About 35 to 40% of police agencies do not even provide data to the FBI. They don't have time to do it. New York City provides zero. NYPD, zero.
Really?
Crime stats. LAPD, zero. There are numerous agencies that provide none. There's many states that provide less than 50%. California is one of those. They only totally provide about 47%. So we're seeing, number one, incorrect data. Number two, the defund movement has hurt crime, because if you have less police officers on the street, which we do, then you're going to see less arrests that occur as a result of that. The third is there's a psychological impact on police officers. They're not doing as much proactive policing. They're doing more reactive policing. Proactive policing means police officers go out and arrest people based on things that they see and witness. That's not happening now because they don't want to end up in jail. They don't want to end up being prosecuted for some reason, or gone after for some reason, or have an internal affairs complaint for no reason, just because somebody can beef the officer and it not be true. So we're going to see crime is already high. It's much higher than what the FBI is saying, but we're going to see an increase on it because of the wilding of humans. We're seeing crime now that's done in masses of people. I'm talking 20, 30, 40 people at a time. We're seeing burglaries that are occurred with 5 or 10 people doing it, not one person at night sneaking through the roof. We're talking about stealing a car, running through the front end of the store, and 10 people getting out of the car. That's just the beginning of the things that we're going to see. We saw a jewelry store in California just the other day.
Right.
40-some people got out of the vehicle and stormed it, all wearing masks, all with clubs. Going into the jewelry store
because they're unrestrained.
Because we don't have focused deterrence. And when we do arrest somebody, woke prosecutors are letting people out on bond, and they're not being sentenced in a timely manner. Criminal histories matter, and it should matter when you're giving bond to somebody. If you've had a history of violence, you should not be awarded bond when you get out. There's no bail for those kinds of things, or the bail should be extremely high. And we're letting people out and they're committing crimes and reoffending. The recidivism rate for violent offenders is about 65%. So if they get out, that means 65% of the time they're going to reoffend and commit violent offenses. And that, let alone, doesn't account for the anarchy that's going to occur because of the politics. And the anarchy is being fomented by politicians. So this summer, we're going to see a huge spike at the RNC, the DNC, throughout the election season. We're going to see a huge spike in civil disobedience. I hope that's not the case, but that's my prediction based on the laws of probability that I'm watching.
And then they'll tell us that the crime that we're witnessing on live television isn't really happening.
That's peaceful
protest. Yeah.
Or it's generated. The new thing is everything's AI generated.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely insane. Let me ask you this. We only have 4 minutes left in this block. Rachel Moren, one of the ladies, beautiful mother of 5 that was murdered, 5 children left behind. You've worked homicide before. Just real quickly, in a minute or less, tell us what those kids must be going through. I mean, you've probably walked into a similar scenario, maybe not with 5 kids, I don't know, but you've had to tell kids or spouses, hey, your spouse, your mother, your father, they've been murdered. How do those family members handle that?
Well, I've done dozens of death notifications, and they're never easy. But the children are the ones that are really affected. They don't understand. They don't understand what happened. They just know that their mom or dad is gone. They don't. They're not. They don't have the understanding of crime and murder and how somebody could take somebody's life. So you don't really get down into the weeds with it. You just basically say, I'm sorry, but your mom is no longer with us,
Yeah.
and that's what leads to it. This is another case where the person had a criminal history. Um, he was stalking the person. She went out for a run. There's no doubt that that person probably was stalking numerous potential victims for that day. Unfortunately for her, she was the one picked. If it wasn't, if she would have gone another direction, I'm pretty sure it would have been somebody else's name that we would have been hearing.
Right.
Um, he had a lot of sexual assault histories that we know of. What we don't know is where he came from, which I think was Venezuela. We don't know the level of crime that that person committed in Venezuela. But we know that he had committed crimes similar to that before. And my question is, how in the world was he not even kicked out of the United States once that is known?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so and so it's just extremely frustrating. The border issue is completely out of control. We've got more than 30,000 potentially Chinese that have crossed into the United States illegally. They're embedded. That means potentially Chinese soldiers that could be embedded here in the U.S. We know that the Chinese market is now taking over some of the drug market. They're the biggest providers of fentanyl. The Chinese have gotten involved in the illicit weed market in California and Oklahoma and Oregon and Washington State. They're starting to make moves on trying to take over that market as well. I could go on and on and on about the crime associated with the illegal immigration issue. We've got to shut it down. We got to go to zero tolerance, and then we got to start kicking people out who've come in illegally, and then start this process back over, because
Yeah.
it's an absolute tragedy what we're seeing today.
We only have just over a minute left. Just real quickly here, going back to illegal immigration. Obviously, we've already got enough crime in this country. Would you say that with the level of illegal immigration that we're experiencing now, how much would you say crime has increased as a result of that? Like in a given city per se. That may sound like a silly question, but like in New York City, since we have so much illegal immigration, or California, homicides, would they double? Would they increase by 10%, 20%? Does that make sense?
It does. I don't think we can come up with an arithmetic figure because it's too difficult. But I
Sure.
do know that if we have 10 million illegal aliens that have come into this country, not all of them are criminals, certainly. Many people
Sure.
want to come into this country because they have a terrible life. But let's make an assumption that just 5% are bad actors, if or even 10% are bad actors. That
30
means
seconds.
that a million bad actors are in this country committing criminal activity or potentially fomenting terrorism. And look what happened with just 19 in 2001. That should scare anybody.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like, and this goes back to your book title again, Dr. Currie Myers, The Advent of Feral Men. I fear, Doc, that we're creating a society with such wild people, that crime won't even be looked at the same by many Americans. That is a concern of mine, that they'll just grow numb to it. It's being normalized. Anyway, we've got to go, but check out his book. Get his book, The Advent of Feral Men. Dr. Currie Myers, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.